Darkness. What makes the dark so terrifying? Is it because you don't know what's around you? In the dark, you can't see the person in your room. In the dark, the noises you hear, you can't connect to where they're coming from. Is the creak in the floorboards from an old and slowly decaying house? Or is someone slowly approaching you? In the dark, is that thing in the corner just some sort of object? Or is it a face looking at you? The darkness holds many unexplained mysteries. When there's an absence of light, is that tiny breeze on your neck just the wind that crept into your home? Or is something breathing on your skin from behind you? When you're walking home at night, you can't be sure what's around you. Maybe somebody is waiting for you in the shadows. I don't know what makes the darkness so haunting, but you're going to find out why I always sleep with the lights on. I live in a rural area of town. Not so rural to where there is not a house or town for 20 miles, but rural enough to where it's always silent at my house. I grew up in the noisy town of Sacramento as a kid. I always hated the sound of trains and car horns. I hated leaving the apartment with my mom and being asked daily if we had change. I always knew when I grew up that I wanted to live in a silent location, a peaceful location. When I was 19, my mom suddenly passed away due to getting hit by a car as she was crossing the street. The person wasn't even drunk. He was texting. The event of my mom dying cemented the drive inside of me to get a good job and make sure that I never had to live in this stupid city again. I finished school a few years later and landed myself a very good paying job. It was a very boring job that consisted of data input and relying on energy drinks to stay awake. But the good thing was that I made enough money to save up to buy a home in the rural town of Wilton. I'm not gonna lie to you, the untimely passing of my mom really messed me up. I wasn't able to hold a relationship for more than a few weeks because I had issues and I was way too clingy. I think it was because I missed that nurturing feeling that my mom gave me, and I looked for it in women and became too attached. Needless to say, I was a little depressed. So I got myself a dog for companionship. It was a Great Dane, a huge dog that I was able to wrap my arms around and give a tight squeeze. And that definitely helped me get through some hard times. At the time of this story, it was November, so it was starting to get colder at night. It had rained earlier in the day, and everything outside was muddy. Every time I let my dog in the house from the outside, I had to wipe her paws off so she wouldn't track mud into the house. I had hardwood floors, so even if she did track mud in, it wasn't a big deal. But I just didn't want to have to clean it up consistently. As the night went on, I rented a movie and sat back and relaxed. My dog snuggled up to my legs in the end of the couch. I was wearing gray sweatpants and a plain white t-shirt with a light blanket across my stomach. It was a little chilly in the house, but nothing that my light blanket couldn't fix. Everything was very quiet, like always. I began to doze off a little during the movie. This is when it started. I woke up from the 5-minute nap I was taking because it was freezing. It felt like the temperature in the house dropped 30 degrees within 5 minutes. I got up to see if I had left a window open, but they were all shut. And then I realized I didn't hear the movie playing on the TV any longer. I know the movie didn't end because I was only about 25 minutes in when I fell asleep. I walked back to the living room, and then I noticed on the TV that the movie was buffering. It was stuck at 25% loaded. I pay a lot of money for my Wi-Fi, and I've never had this happen before. But as I was waiting for the TV to continue loading, the TV glitched. A few seconds after that, all of the lights in my house shut off. The power went out. It started making me feel a little bit nervous in my stomach, because there was no neighbors with lights on, or street lights to shine into my house. Even the moonlight was blocked by large trees surrounding my house. It was pitch black. I stood there in the dark for a few minutes waiting for the power to come back. It finally turned on. Now that I could see, I thought to go to my hallway and see if I had any spare candles. But when I got to the hallway, I saw something that made my skin bump up. There were muddy footprints in the hallway. I jumped back a few steps and I lost my breath. These footprints were not from me, and they weren't there earlier. They were so new and fresh that I could smell the smell of dirty mud in the hallway. And as I was staring down at these footprints, the lights turned off again. I began to panic. There's someone in my house. And then the lights went out again. I did my best to quickly navigate through the black house and grab my phone. I tripped on what seemed like a million things. I ended up finding my phone on the couch. I grabbed it and turned on the flashlight only to find out that my phone was at 4%, and my stupid phone wouldn't allow me to use the light. As I was looking down at my phone and cussing it out for not working, I could hear footsteps in the hallway. They weren't fast like a little child running by. They were slow, like a lion about to pounce on a gazelle. My dog was barking like crazy. I whistled and called my dog's name and ran to the front door to run out of my house. But when I got to the door and reached for the doorknob, instead of feeling a cold metal knob, I felt the top of a cold hand. Whoever was in my house was standing in front of the door, holding the doorknob. I slowly stepped backwards into the surrounding darkness. Urine began to stream down my leg. I retracted into a childlike state and began to whimper. I did the only thing I could think to do. I ran to my room, using the feeling of the wall to guide me. On my way to the room, I could hear this thing laughing at me. I made it to my room and I slammed the door shut, and I jumped into my bed and pulled the covers over my head like a 5-year-old boy. I was shaking on all parts of my body. I could still hear the satanic laughing from the other room. But then it stopped, and then the slow, uneven sound of footsteps began again, slowly creaking down the hallway. Each step grew louder towards my room. And then my door opened, and the footsteps approached the end of my bed. I could feel this person, or this thing's presence, hovering over me, staring at my face through the blankets. I didn't know what to do. I was about to die. At that very second, my dog ran into the room growling and attacked whatever was there. It gave me enough time to jump out of bed and run as fast as I could to the front door. I ran outside to the circuit box and flipped all the switches down and then back up, and my lights came back on. I screamed for my dog, and she ran out of my room, down the hall and out the front door to me. She and I ran as fast as we could to the neighbor's house, which was a ways down the road. We called the police and they arrived minutes later. They looked around my house but found nothing. They even declared that there was no forced entry. I couldn't believe what they were saying, because all of my windows were shut and the door was locked. And then I started to think about everything that led up to it. My house was freezing. My movie was buffering, which never happened. My TV glitched, and the lights were going out. And the footprints were only in my house once the light went out. I don't know what really happened. I can't explain it, but I think I was attacked by an unexplainable evil presence. I stayed at my friend's house for a while until I could get my house up on the market. The house ended up selling for a lot less than I bought it for, but I didn't care. I sold it to an older guy in his 50s. I told him what happened, but he laughed and looked at me like I was crazy. I was very happy to be in a different place. I moved back into the city because being here was better than what I went through. Then a few weeks later, around 9 p.m., I get a phone call. It's from the man who bought my house. I answered the call and he was breathing very heavily. I said, "Hello?" He said, "What did you say happened to you in this house?" I told him I didn't feel comfortable speaking about it and that I had to go. Before I could press the red hang-up button, he stopped me by saying something. The phone wasn't to my ear, so I put it back, and I said, "What was that?" He took a few deep breaths and said, "There's footprints in my hallway." And then the phone died.